So, um, I saw a few of the talking points that Chantel said, so I wanted to ask you a few of those and also some questions I had while reading.
Sure, just give me your
So
reaction
I'm going
to
to
the
start
book.
off. So much, I really enjoyed it because I'm not much of a nonfiction reader, but being from New York City and being African American, um, learning the history that you noted about Buffalo and Rochester with Frederick Douglass, I thought it was really interesting to me because it's not something that, especially in New York City schools, that they're teaching the young Black and Brown students out here.
Mm.
That notion that July 5th is a very important date to note because of his speech was something that I was like, okay, this is not something I've ever heard. I want to learn more about. So going towards that July 5th, is there any things that if I want to go deeper into Frederick Douglass and that time period, there anything you recommend that I would read?
Sure, I would urge you to go directly to David Blight's biography of Douglass. It's an extraordinary book that gives you a sense of the period.
David.
It'll blow your mind. And of course, there's a lot that's been written. A lot has been written on Douglass's July 5th address. But there are some other works on
Mm-hmm.
New York Abolition Day, which is July 5th. Um, that was one of the most important holidays in Black America before Juneteenth.
Election Day. I thought that was interesting, especially being from New York, not knowing that New York
Yeah.
Abolition Day was even a thing.
Yeah.
Like it, like we do after the Juneteenth holiday here in New York. There's a lot of Juneteenth celebrations, but there's nobody saying, "Hey, let's celebrate New York Abolition Day over
Right.
here."
But that's why the July
Um,
5th date was so important that Douglass delivered his speech in 1852.
yeah, yeah. Um, so in your introduction, I really thought was interesting. You in like the beginning, you're like, I do not love America and never have, especially now. It seems misplaced to me, misplaced or dangerous to love something so abstract and morally dubious. I suspect, and then ellipsis, I suspect love of country is shorthand for the heartfelt relationships and experiences that make us who we are, things that happen in the place we call home, no matter how complicated that might be. So, with that note that you make in the introduction, what exactly led you to those conclusions of not loving America? Is it something that you developed as a child, or was it as learning Black history throughout adulthood and beyond?
I think it began in childhood, right? I tell the story about us, when my father moved us from one side of town to the other, and I'm playing with my Tonka truck with a new neighbor outside, and his dad comes out and he calls me the N-word. And what I say is that, that's not just simply Mississippi, that the country believed that about me. And so what happened is that I went inside, I grabbed my truck and I went into my home, and my dad and my mom had to do the work that many Black parents have to do, and that is to convince me not to believe what the world says about me. Right? That loving work of putting a crown above my head. And so there's always been this vexed relationship to the country. Because we have to, in some ways, the charge of every parent, Black parent, in this country, is to raise their child to not believe what the world says about them. And so I think it has its root in that experience. Of course, as I grew older and I was reading in African American history and the like, I have this complicated relationship with the country. Baldwin has this complicated relationship with the country. And what I'm saying in that moment, Sasha, is that I don't love the abstraction because, sometimes American patriotism to my ear sounds like a rebel yell, right? And so it's not that I
Yeah,
don't love the
yeah,
abstraction. I love the people on the ground, close to the ground. That's what I'm trying to
yeah,
get to. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I thought it was really important for you to note that and pretty much start off the book grounding us in this notion and in this idea that kind of you carry throughout the book because I feel like it's not a fiction novel, but the theme that you bring there kind of I feel it throughout the reading I did of the different anniversaries and how race shadows them.
Hmm.
Um and another point in the introduction that I really had to note down and put in my little Apple notes. Distrust has seeped into every facet of our political lives and festers in those intimate spaces where hatred goes unchecked. So I
Mm.
feel like that really is prescient for this moment, especially with the landmark Supreme Court ruling that has pretty much pulled back the Voting Rights Act and taken out the redistricting process. And I think it was like Virginia and Tennessee are in contention lawsuits with this um, redistricting that they're planning on doing.
Yeah, I mean,
So I thought that was interesting starting to read this after this because I didn't read it until after the legislation started happening.
yeah, I think it's this idea of the intimacy of hatred, to my mind, takes us to the central question, which is always a matter of the heart. Of course, there's policy. I mean, the gutting of the Voting Rights Act has clear policy implications, but we have to understand what's motivating it, what's driving it. And since 1965, uh, over 60 years, we have lived with the Voting Rights Act in place. So what was going on in those private spaces, those intimate spaces, which would lead in the blink of an eye, not only Louisiana, but Tennessee and Alabama and Florida and Texas, all of these in a blink of an eye, to suddenly roll it all back, because hatred festers there. And it's where we're most segregated. We don't know. We're all walking mysteries to each other if we really think about it.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting because during the 2016 election, I was in journalism school. No longer a journalist, but that was my ministry back then. And noting how after the 2016 election, there was a shift in journalism for journalists to now understand the unheard population, to reach out to these voters that were not heard. And I thought it was interesting because those voters, I don't think they were not heard. I think people were just not listening.
Mm. Yeah, and
Uh,
yeah, no, no, I think that's absolutely right. And but then we see, as I write in the chapter "Freedom is the White Man's Gift," right? That this is sentimentality. It's not really connected to justice. And so once
yeah,
that sentimentality is exhausted, they then lash out, it's like a bent twig lashing back. Suddenly we find ourselves from a moment of sentimentality in a moment of absolute rage. It's
yeah.
the whirlwind, to quote Gwendolyn Brooks.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, especially the moments where you point out that there's like these times periods where people like, what else does the Negro want? What else? We've done this for you. What more can you want? We've already given you these little pieces and crumbs of civil rights. You shouldn't ask for more, kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's exhausting, as I said on Nicole Wallace a couple of weeks ago. It's exhausting that some people believe, whether they're liberal or conservative or extreme right, that freedom is their possession, that they can give and then take away. And as long as that view obtains, we find ourselves in these vicious cycles. And our charge in the midst of it all is that we have to raise our babies. We have to get our
Yeah,
babies to the other side in the midst of this.
yeah, yeah. And it's one thing that living specifically in New York City, which is an extremely segregated city, um, so many people I'm in the book influencer space. So many people speak to me, they think that like it's all fine and dandy over here. And I'm like, the reality in New York City versus the reality in New York State is definitely a different animal. There's some racism that is just prevalent. You get on a subway line, you see where certain people get off the train.
Yeah.
You get on the bus. There's only certain people on certain buses.
Yeah.
Um, so
As
it's definitely
you just remember what Malcolm X said: as long as you south of the Canadian border, you in the South.
that's true. That's true. Yeah, because my dad's from down south. He's from the edge of Florida, Alabama, born in the 1940s. So I've had some of those stories that he's told me of childhood, picking pecans, having to
Mhm.
walk miles to school, being in an only black school. So there's some things that, like, just from his lived experience, I've learned. But I feel like there's always so much more to learn because just one perspective is not going to show you the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, So I'm gonna try to pull in one of the talking points.
Sure.
So why does this book feel especially urgent right now at this moment in history?
Well, it's in so many ways it has to do with the fact that people are trying to deny it. They're going to tell a story on July 4th of the country that it's going to be all triumph and celebration. It's going to be fantasy and myth, and it's going to presuppose that you and I that black people played a minor part in the history of the country. They might trot out some entertainer or some familiar figure, but for the most part, we won't be central to that story. And so part of what I wanted to do with America USA was to challenge it, to engage in a kind of frontal assault, which is in some ways what we've been doing uh, at every milestone anniversary. So whenever the country, whether it's this centennial or whether it's this 150th or the bicentennial or now, whenever the country has sought to tell a story of itself, we have spoken back. We haven't been passive in this regard. And so I think what I wanted to do in this moment was to tell a fuller story, to see the repetitions, to see how what they're doing, right, is in so many ways a reflection of the madness at the heart of the country, that divided soul of America, as it were.
Okay. I feel like that your answer covers like a couple of talking points that they threw out
Don't worry about the
there.
talking points. You and
But
I are talking.
that's great. No, I know. I'm like, I just wanted to well round the conversation with some of the questions that I thought might make sense with the what I was gonna ask.
Sure.
Um, so if there's one idea that people should take away from this book, or which one would you think is that one moment that people need to really be reflecting on after reading this book?
I think it's the divided soul claim. That America imagines itself as a beacon of freedom and as a white republic. And that if we're going to get out of this madness, if we're going to escape it, if we're going to get to the other side of it, we're going to have to make a choice. It's not complicated. It's not a matter of a list of policies. Of course, we need to address the politics, but it's a moral choice, an ethical choice. Are you going to be a beacon of freedom or are you going to be a white republic? You can't be both. The history of the country reveals that we can't be both. And it seems to me that if we're going to, how can I put this? If we're going to chart a different path for the country over the next 250 years, uh, the, the momentous nature of that choice needs to be felt and understood. It seems to me that is the major point. Damn it, choose so that we can finally get out of this cycle, if that makes sense.
Yeah, from chapter one, that kind of reminds me. Note, white America cries its tears and leaves the world exactly as it is. And I thought of that like in parentheses right next to that note. I was like the prevalence of thoughts and prayers from politicians. Every type of atrocity we've had, you see on Twitter, aka X. My thoughts and prayers are with these people, but there's no actual policy change. There's no actual steps. Um,
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, no, no.
That's that sentimentality, right? And remember what Baldwin says, sentimentality is the mask for cruelty, right?
Yeah,
I don't want your crocodile tears. You know,
yeah,
empathy is important. I'm not denying it, but it doesn't stand in for justice.
it does not. Um, and then I'm like going through my next note. I noted in chapter 3, you mentioned about Frederick Douglass. He bore the brunt of the nation's hubris, the belief that somehow this place was a beacon of freedom, as even as it wallowed in the sins of slavery and racism. So that kind of also reminds me of the one point that you want to push forward if a person has to just take one idea. Um,
Yeah, it's that choice, right? And Douglas is such a critical example. The man uh, was a slave. He was enslaved. He escaped. He lived long enough to witness the Emancipation Proclamation and the signing of the Civil War amendments that had made slavery illegal and extended the franchise to black men. But he also lived long enough to see the country embrace Jim Crow, right?
yeah.
And disenfranchise black folks. So his life, in so many ways, reveals the tragic dimensions of the country itself. It seems to me.
Yeah. And I like not that it's like a plan, but it was interesting that he died of a heart attack right when he was about to go to do another July 5th speaking. And I
Yeah,
thought I was like what a like not that as I said not that it's planned, but what an interesting way for his life to end.
yeah.
Uh, um and then I'm not sure how much longer we have. But I do want to note from chapter 4, the problem that white people believe, for whatever reason, that they ought to be valued more than others and that they alone possessed freedom.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of how you note that white people believe that freedom is their right to give out, and I feel like dole it out piecemeal, give you little drips and drops and then take it back. Um,
Yeah, I think we have to throw that notion out of the window. Freedom does not belong to them. And
yeah,
I think this is the point that I'm making that extends beyond Sasha, it extends beyond just simply, the extreme right or MAGA Republicans. It extends to white liberals.
yeah.
We don't need charity, Douglas said. We need justice.
Yes.
And I
I-
think that's a very different orientation.
Yeah, I've noticed it, especially like going back to my time in journalism school. I was one of not many Black students in my specific program. And it was interesting that one of my classmates, myself and my classmates, Trinidadian, we had a heated debate about how lynching is still a thing in the modern day. He thought it was a past. One
Mm.
of my white classmates thought lynching was something of the past. And I was like, no, 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 no. Lynching is modern day. There are still people being lynched to this day. You might not call it lynching, but it is a lynching.
Indeed. Racial violence still haunts and shadows this place.
You-
And just 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we all witnessed it with George Floyd and Derek Chauvin, right?
Yeah,
We all witnessed it in real time. It's not a relic of the past. The past actually has us by the throat. The past is we carry it with us in the present. So it's not something distant. It's
no.
right in front of us.
And it's interesting how DEI DEI became a big thing back after um, George Floyd, but now we've rolled back the times. Now, what I thought was interesting in a later chapter, you note that Donald Trump talks about now this is a country based on merit.
Ah,
But I thought when you said that, when I read that, merit for who? by what standard is merit determined? Because if merit is determined truly, it would be equal, but merit is determined by your skin.
No, Sashi, that's absolutely right. And when you make that point, that's all we need to do is juxtapose the claim around merit with the people who are running the government. I mean, we have some of the most unqualified, some of the most mediocre white men and women running the country that one can imagine. So we know it's not merit in any shape, form, or fashion in this regard. That we are in the midst of a white nationalist project combined with unbridled greed. And race is one of the key engines to it all, it seems to me. So you're absolutely right. Merit is now the cudgel. They're beating us over the head with it as they roll back the legislation, the policies that ushered in a new world, those policies from the mid 20th century that ushered in a new world that made our lives possible.
Yeah, yeah. It's, it it's like it's nonsensical to people of color or black people how when you decide that things are based on merit, merit doesn't include people of color, merit doesn't include black people. We're relegated to secondhand citizens.
They make it seem as if any achievement that we have, how can I put it, anything that we've done, any success that we've experienced is because of them, not because of our own talent and skill.
Yeah,
And I think that in and of itself, right, has to be interrogated. By definition, according to them, I'm an affirmative action appointment at Princeton. Well, that says more about them than me, if you
yeah,
really think about it. But it also reveals how deep the racist assumptions actually go.
yeah. And as you noted earlier, it's intimate. These
Yes.
there's so many spaces that these conversations, these hatreds are festering, but we don't see them because we're not privy to those spaces. Even
Indeed.
if we were, those people, it feels like sometimes the black people who are privy to those spaces are willfully ignorant and stick their head in the sand.
Yeah, we are complicated just like all the people on the planet. We are complicated
Yeah,
in a number of different ways.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So I think we might be at our time. I
Well,
shouldn't have,
first of all, let me just say
but
this I know we're done, but I saw all of those tabs on the book
yeah,
and I really appreciate you reading it so carefully and closely. I really do. Thank you
yeah.
so much.